I spent 8 months at a remote military research station in Alaska where something moved through the walls every night at 3:47 a.m. On my last night there, I finally saw what it was, and I understand now why the previous crew never made it home. The recruitment officer never mentioned the walls. He talked about the cold, how it could drop to -60 in the winter months. He mentioned the isolation, 6 months minimum with a crew of 9, no contact with the outside world except for monthly supply drops. He even warned me about the darkness, how the sun would disappear for weeks at a time, and how that kind of endless night could do things to a person's mind. But he never mentioned the walls. I arrived at Forward Operating Base Coldwater on September 14th, just as the days were beginning to shorten. The base sat in a valley surrounded by mountains that looked like broken teeth against the sky. The buildings were prefabricated structures, gray and utilitarian, connected by covered walkways that rattled in the wind. Everything was metal and concrete, designed to withstand the brutal Alaskan weather. My role was simple: atmospheric scientist. I was there to monitor air quality, track weather patterns, and maintain the equipment that kept our research data flowing back to the continental United States. It was supposed to be quiet work, meditative even. The crew was small. Commander Sarah Vickers ran the station with military precision. She was 43, with gray eyes that seemed to calculate the weight of every word before she spoke. Dr. Marcus Chen was our geologist, obsessed with the permafrost samples he extracted from the surrounding terrain. There was Petty Officer James Riley, who handled communications and supply logistics. Kate Morrison, our medic, who had a nervous habit of cracking her knuckles when she was thinking. 3 other researchers, 2 engineers, and me. We were 9 people in a metal box, surrounded by thousands of miles of frozen nothing. The first week was normal. I fell into the routine. Morning briefings, equipment checks, data analysis, evening meals in the common area, where we'd play cards or watch old movies on someone's laptop. The base was cramped, but functional. My quarters were a 10 by 10 room with a narrow bed, a desk, and a small window that looked out at the mountains. At night, I could hear the wind testing the seams of the building, looking for ways inside. It was on the 8th night that I first heard it. I'd been asleep, deeply, dreamlessly asleep, when something woke me. I opened my eyes in the darkness, disoriented, my heart already beating faster than it should. The digital clock on my desk read 3:47 a.m. At first, I heard nothing but the wind. Then, underneath that familiar howl, I caught something else, a sound like fingernails on metal. Slow, deliberate, coming from inside the wall beside my bed. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I sat up, my breath forming small clouds in the cold air. My heating system always cycled down at night to conserve fuel, and my room hovered just above freezing. I stared at the wall, waiting. The scratching moved. It traveled along the wall from left to right at about chest height. Not random. Not the sound of settling metal or shifting ice. It was methodical, purposeful. Then it stopped. I waited in the silence for 5 minutes, maybe 10. My hands were shaking. From cold, I told myself, just from cold. Finally, I lay back down and pulled my blanket up to my chin. I didn't sleep again that night. At breakfast, I mentioned it to Kate. She was stirring sugar into our coffee, 3 precise rotations clockwise. "You heard it too?" she said quietly. "You've heard it?" She glanced around the common area. Commander Vickers was reviewing weather reports at the next table. Dr. Chen was absorbed in his tablet. Kate leaned closer. "Every night. Same time. 3:47 exactly." She paused, her spoon frozen mid-stir. I thought I was going crazy. "Have you told anyone else?" "I mentioned it to Vickers 2 weeks ago. She said old buildings make noise. Thermal expansion, pressure changes, that sort of thing." Kate's knuckles cracked. "But Marcus has heard it too. And Riley." "So half the crew?" The half that sleeps in the east wing, Kate set down her spoon, where the walls connect to Section D. Section D was the oldest part of the base, built in 1983 during some Cold War research initiative that had been declassified but remained vague in the official records. It was mostly storage now. Old equipment, archived files, forgotten supplies. We rarely went there. The heating didn't work properly and the lights flickered constantly. "What do you think it is?" I asked. Kate looked at me with those tired eyes, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too much thinking. "I don't know," she said, "but it's getting louder."
That night, I lay awake waiting for 3:47. The wind had picked up, and snow was pelting my window like thrown sand. My room was dark except for the blue glow of the clock. I watched the minutes change. 3:44, 3:45, 3:46. At 3:47, the scratching began. This time, it was louder. Not just fingernails. It sounded like something dragging itself along the inside of the wall. Metal groaning. Deliberate movement. It started at the far corner of my room and traveled along the wall toward my bed. I reached for my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the bare metal wall. Nothing, just rivets and seams and the faint condensation of my breath. But the sound continued. It reached the section of wall directly beside my bed and stopped. For 30 seconds, there was only silence and the wind. Then came the tapping. 3 slow, rhythmic taps against the metal. Tap, tap, tap. Like something was testing the wall, like something was listening. I pressed my hand against the cold metal. It vibrated slightly under my palm. "Hello?" I whispered. The tapping stopped. I waited, my hand still on the wall, my breath held. Then I heard it, so faint I almost missed it beneath the wind. A whisper, on the other side of the wall. Not words, just the shape of a voice. Human, but wrong. Like someone speaking with too much air in their lungs or not enough. I jerked my hand away and scrambled out of bed. I pulled on my thermal layers and boots and stepped into the hallway. The corridor was empty, lit by emergency lights that cast everything in a sickly amber glow. I could see the doors to the other quarters, all closed. At the end of the hall was the sealed entrance to Section D. I walked toward it slowly. My footsteps echoed on the metal floor. The door was industrial grade, with a wheel lock like something from a submarine. There was frost around the edges. I'd never been inside. None of us had, except Vickers, and only once during my first week to confirm it was secure. I put my ear against the cold metal and listened. Nothing. I was about to turn away when I heard it, the scratching. Inside Section D, moving along the walls, getting closer to the door. I backed away and returned to my room. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went to Commander Vickers. Her office was sparse, a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a map of the surrounding terrain on the wall. She looked up from her computer screen as I entered. "I need to go into Section D," I said. Vickers leaned back in her chair. "Why?" "The sounds at night. I think they're coming from there. I've told Dr. Morrison, old buildings make noise, especially in these conditions. Thermal expansion. I know what thermal expansion sounds like, Commander. This is different." She studied me for a long moment. "You look tired, Dr. Hayes." "Because something is scratching inside our walls every night at exactly 3:47 a.m. Same time every night? To the minute." Vickers tapped her fingers on the desk, 4 taps, precise and measured. "Section D has been sealed since before my arrival. According to base records, it hasn't been opened in over a year." "Then what's inside?" "Storage, old research equipment, nothing that moves, nothing alive." "Will you open it?" "No," her voice was firm.
Section D is structurally questionable. The heating system failed years ago, and there's potential frost damage to the walls. Opening it would be a safety risk. And the sounds will stop bothering you once you accept there's a reasonable explanation. She turned back to her computer. Get some rest, Dr. Hayes. That's an order. I didn't go to Vickers again. Instead, I went to Marcus Chen. I found him in the lab, analyzing core samples under a microscope. He looked up as I entered, his eyes red-rimmed behind his glasses. "You look how I feel," he said. "347?" I asked. He nodded. "Every night. I've started taking sleep medication, but I still wake up, like my body knows something's wrong." I pulled up a chair. "What do you know about Section D?" Marcus removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Not much. Built in the 80s as part of some atmospheric research project, officially decommissioned in 91. The records are vague. Lots of redacted sections." "Redacted by who?" "Doesn't say. Could be DOD, could be EPA, could be something else." He put his glasses back on. "Why are you asking?" "Because I think whatever's making that sound is in there, and I think Vickers knows it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a key ring with a single brass key. "What's that?" I asked. "Master key, for the old sections. I found it in a toolbox last month." He held it out to me. "If you're going in, take this, but I'm not going with you." "Why not?" "Because I have 2 kids back home, and whatever's in there." He trailed off, staring at the key in my hand. "Just be careful." I waited until the next night. At 3:30, I dressed in full thermal gear and grabbed my flashlight. The hallway was empty, everyone asleep or pretending to be. I walked to the Section D door and stood before it, feeling the cold radiating through the metal.
The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the silence. I turned the wheel lock, and the door unsealed with a hiss of escaping air. Frost cracked and fell away from the edges. I pulled the door open. The smell hit me first. Stale air, rust, and something else. Something organic, like decay, but not quite. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. Section D was a narrow corridor lined with storage rooms. The walls were older here, riveted steel painted institutional green, now flaking and rusted. Icicles hung from exposed pipes overhead. My breath formed thick clouds in the beam of my flashlight. I walked slowly, checking each room. Most were empty or filled with broken equipment, old computers, weather instruments, filing cabinets with frozen drawers. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost. At the end of the corridor was a larger door, partially open. Light flickered beyond it, yellow and weak, like a dying bulb. I approached carefully. The door was heavy, and I had to pull hard to open it wider. The hinges shrieked. The room beyond was large, maybe 30 feet square. It had been some kind of research space. There were work tables, overturned chairs, and scattered papers frozen to the floor. But what caught my attention were the walls. They were covered in scratches. Not random damage, these were deliberate marks, carved deep into the metal. They covered every surface, overlapping and chaotic, like someone had been trying to write something but couldn't form the words. Some were shallow, like fingernails. Others were deep gouges, like something with more force had dug in. In the center of the room was a bed frame, old military issue, the kind with thin metal posts. The mattress was gone, but leather restraints dangled from each corner, frozen stiff. My light swept across the room and stopped on the far wall. Someone had carved words there. Large, jagged letters, almost illegible. "It wants out." Below that, in smaller text, "Don't listen when it speaks." My hands were shaking now, and not from cold. I heard the scratching behind me. I spun around, my light cutting through the darkness. The corridor I'd just walked through was empty, but the sound was there. Inside the walls, moving, coming closer. I backed toward the center of the room, my light dancing between the doorway and the scratched walls. The sound grew louder, a wet, sliding noise, like something dragging itself through confined spaces. Then I saw it. In the gap where the wall met the ceiling, something moved. The metal paneling bulged outward, then snapped back. Something was inside the wall, pushing against it from within. The scratching stopped. For 5 seconds there was only my ragged breathing and the hum of the dying light. Then the wall began to tear. The metal sheeting peeled back slowly, the rivets popping loose one by one. In the gap I saw movement, pale and writhing, like skin but wrong, too smooth, too wet. I ran. I burst out of the room and sprinted down the corridor, my flashlight beam jerking wildly. Behind me I heard the screech of tearing metal and something else, a sound that might have been breathing, if breathing could be done without lungs. I reached the main door, slammed through it, and spun the wheel lock shut. I stood there in the hallway gasping, my hands pressed against the cold metal. From the other side, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks, exactly like the ones I'd heard from my room. Then silence. I went straight to Vickers' office, not caring that it was 4 in the morning. I pounded on her door until she opened it, fully dressed, like she'd been awake. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. "You knew," I said. "You knew something was in there." Vickers stepped aside. "Come in." Her office was different now. Papers covered her desk, old reports, handwritten notes, diagrams. She closed the door behind me. "Sit down, Dr. Hayes." I stayed standing. "What is it?" Vickers moved to her desk and picked up a file folder, yellowed with age. In 1984, this base was conducting classified research into extreme environment survival. They brought in test subjects, volunteers supposedly, and exposed them to various conditions: sensory deprivation, prolonged cold exposure, psychological isolation. Human experiments? Officially denied, but the records exist if you know where to look. She opened the folder, showing me photographs, black and white images of people in medical gowns, their faces gaunt. One subject, designated Patient 7, was kept in isolation in Section D for 6 months. The reports say he changed. Changed how? Vickers pulled out another document. I recognized the handwriting. It matched the words carved into the wall. His body adapted to the confinement. His bones softened. His joints became hyperextended. He stopped eating, but he didn't die. The researchers documented it all. They thought they were witnessing evolution in real time. That's impossible. So is something living in our walls. Vickers set down the papers. Patient 7 stopped being human. The project was shut down, the base was evacuated, and Section D was sealed off. But they didn't remove him. They just left him there. Why didn't you tell us? Because knowing doesn't help. It's been 40 years. Whatever Patient 7 was, he should be dead. But every crew reports the same sounds. Every crew finds the scratches spreading farther. She looked at me with those calculating gray eyes. And every crew that's tried to do something about it has lost members.
What happened to them? They opened the walls. They tried to hunt it. And it hunted back. Vickers closed the folder. The previous crew, the one before us, they lost 2 people.
One disappeared from his quarters. The other they found inside the ventilation shaft, folded up in a space that shouldn't have fit a human body. I felt cold spreading through my chest. So what do? We wait. We finish our rotation, and we don't open the walls. She paused. You already opened Section D, didn't you? I nodded. Then we have 2 months until extraction, and it knows we're here now. The scratching changed after that night. It no longer came at 3:47. It came at random times. During meals, during work, during the thin slices of sleep we managed. It moved through all the walls now, not just the east wing. We could hear it traveling through the base, following us from room to room. Kate started sleeping in the common area with all the lights on. Marcus moved his bed away from the walls. Riley requested an emergency extraction, but command denied it. Weather conditions were too severe for flights. I spent my time reviewing the research files Vickers had shown me. Patient 7 had been a 28-year-old volunteer named David Keller. The photographs showed his progression, first normal, then thin, then something else entirely. In the final image, his limbs were bent at angles that didn't match human anatomy. His eyes were too large, his fingers too long. The last entry in his file, dated March 15, 1985, read, "Subject has ceased verbal communication. Attempts at removal have failed. Recommend permanent containment." They'd walled him in alive. On night 53 of our rotation, Kate disappeared. We found her room empty at breakfast, her bed neatly made. We searched the entire base, every room, every closet, every storage space. Nothing. Until Riley noticed the vent cover in her quarters was loose. We pulled it off and looked inside. The vent shaft was narrow, maybe 18 inches wide. We shone flashlights into the darkness but saw nothing. Vickers assembled everyone in the common area. Her face was pale but controlled. No one goes anywhere alone. We sleep in pairs. We work in pairs. We have 43 days until extraction. She looked at each of us. We survive that long. We go home. That night, I bunked with Marcus in his quarters. We pushed both beds against the far wall and sat facing the door, fully dressed, flashlights ready. At 2:17 a.m., the scratching began. It moved along the ceiling directly above us, slow and deliberate. Then it stopped, right in the center of the room. We heard the metal groan. A bulge appeared in the ceiling panel, pressing down. Whatever was up there was heavy. The metal bent further, and a seam split open. "We need to go," Marcus whispered. But before we could move, the bulge retreated. The metal snapped back into place. And then we heard Kate's voice. It came from inside the walls, thin and distant. "Help me," she said. "Please, I'm so cold." Marcus stood up, but I grabbed his arm. "That's not Kate," I said. "Help me," the voice repeated. "I'm stuck. I can't move." It was perfect, the same inflection, the same scared tone, but it was coming from the wall, from a space where no human could fit. "Please," Kate's voice sobbed. "Please don't leave me." Marcus was shaking. "We have to." "I said it's not her," I said firmly. "Kate is gone." The sobbing stopped. Then we heard something else. Wet breathing. Very close, just on the other side of the wall. And then it spoke in a voice that wasn't Kate's, wasn't anyone's. "I know you're listening. I can hear your hearts." We ran. We burst into the hallway and didn't stop until we reached the common area where the others had gathered. Vickers looked at us, and we didn't need to explain. She knew. The final weeks collapsed into paranoia and exhaustion. We stopped sleeping. We burned through our coffee rations. We sat in the common area with every light on, waiting for the extraction date that felt impossibly far away. The scratching became constant, a background noise that never stopped, moving through the walls like a tide. Sometimes we heard voices, Kate asking for help, our own voices calling to each other from empty rooms, whispers that almost formed words. Dr. Chen had a breakdown on day 72. We found him in the lab trying to cut through a wall panel with a hacksaw. Vickers sedated him. On day 81, Riley disappeared. We found his jacket and the ventilation shaft torn and bloody. We were down to 6 people. The night before extraction, Vickers gathered us in her office. The helicopter arrives at 800. We stay together until then. No one sleeps, no one separates. She looked at each of us. We're almost out. At 3:47 a.m., the power went out. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. And in the darkness, we heard it moving. Not in the walls anymore, in the corridors. Heavy footsteps that didn't sound right, like joints bending in the wrong places. We locked ourselves in Vickers' office and pushed furniture against the door. Something moved past in the hallway outside. We heard it breathing, wet, labored breaths that came too fast. Then it stopped outside our door. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and mocking. "We know you're in there," it said, and the voice was wrong. Too many consonants, too much air. "We've been waiting. So long. So cold." The door handle rattled. Vickers raised her pistol, hands steady. The door handle stopped moving. We heard the footsteps retreat down the hallway, irregular and dragging. We waited in the red darkness, weapons drawn, until the sun finally rose at 7:34 a.m. The helicopter arrived exactly on time. We ran across the tarmac through the wind and snow and didn't look back. I climbed aboard and finally turned around as we lifted off. Through the window, I saw the base shrinking below us, gray and small against the white expanse. And in one of the windows of Section D, I saw movement. Something pale pressed against the glass, watching us leave. The pilot said something about weather and flight time. Vickers was filing her report, but I just stared out the window as the base disappeared into the distance. I've been back in the continental United States for 3 months now. They assigned me to a weather station in Montana. Nice and warm, no isolation protocols. But sometimes at night, I wake up at exactly 3:47 a.m. and I hear scratching. It's faint. So faint I almost convince myself it's nothing. Just the house settling. Just the wind. Just my imagination. But it's always at 3:47. And it's getting louder. They sent a new crew to Forward Operating Base Coldwater last month. 9 people. Same as us. I wanted to warn them. Tried to send messages through official channels, but the reports were classified. The files were sealed. All I could do was watch the mission briefing online and see their faces. Young, eager, unaware. I wonder which one sleeps in the East Wing. I wonder how long it will take them to hear it. And I wonder if Patient 7 is still alone in those walls, or if Kate and Riley are in there with him, now changed and hungry, waiting for 3:47 a.m. Because sometimes when I'm lying awake in the dark, I don't just hear the scratching. I hear Kate's voice, and she's not asking for help anymore. She's calling my name.